Ohio House Speaker Matt Huffman and Ohio House Finance Committee Chairman Brian Stewart, thank you so much for being on the first episode of Message from the House. And I think, we couldn't have picked a better first episode. We're talking about the operating budget. That's kind of going to be the basis of this show, is to talk about our legislation, our priorities, maybe have a little fun in between. I mean, not that that's acceptable, right? We don't have fun.
I'm here for fun.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thanks.
I was promised fun.
Okay, good. Well, you will be the fun on this episode. I'll hold you to it. All right, so I want to start with operating budget. We heard about the capital budget in the summer of 2024. Just saw the governor sign the transportation budget, and now we're talking operating. Speaker Huffman, if you could just tell us why this piece of legislation is so important for Ohioans.
So constitutionally, the General Assembly must pass a budget by June 30th of the odd-numbered year. So and the funding for all of the government activities expires on that date. Sometimes we have passed an interim budget for a couple of weeks, but that's bad practice. And so we have this June 30 date in place that is important for a whole panoply of different items, whether it's from schools, state government, prisons, highway patrol, local government, library funding. So it really is the most important bill that we pass in a 2-year General Assembly. Now, in addition, of course, to money, there are often many policy items that are changed. And, we always have this argument about, how much policy should be in it and shouldn't be. And the process itself, typically the governor prepares a budget, is introduced, and the House sort of gets the first shot at what happens with the governor's budget. The Senate will get the next crack at it, and they'll have it for probably a couple months, and then we'll come back in June and likely try to, in a conference committee, make those changes. So a lot of money, about $60 billion in the general revenue fund only. There's additional money from other funds, but there'll be a lot of policy too. And we'll have a debate about how much policy and what else we do about it. I did want to say, first of all, and I should have said this before I started, congratulations to Carolyn and you, Olivia, and the whole communications team on putting this great set together. I'm not sure if I think I've been on talk shows in Lima, Ohio, but no place else. But you really did a fantastic job putting this together, and it's a great way to communicate. And I think for better or for worse, we can send newsletters and even town halls and things like this, but modern communications with constituents today are done with things like podcasts. Now, I think I do a lot of radio interviews, and people will tell me that, but people can watch these podcasts at their leisure. It's an extended explanation of things, not just the 3 sentences you may get in a newspaper article or TV interview. And so I was just hearing about Brian Stewart's own podcast, but I'm glad you guys have done such a great job putting this together.
I feel better that we have a professional podcaster here for the first episode. I will admit this is my first. I too have been on talk shows in Lima, Ohio. Well, the news.
Yeah, that's right.
Not quite a talk show. Connecting point for all of us. You mentioned priorities, talking about how this process worked with coming up with this budget. I'll turn it over to Rep. Stewart. Kind of talk me through a couple of the hot ticket items that you really wanted to focus on, you really wanted to fund in this budget.
I think every budget, school funding is a huge part of it. It's inevitable. It's one of the biggest, spending programs that we have. And so I think we started out knowing that we have a much leaner budget to work with than we've had the last couple cycles. We didn't have this kind of mountain of federal money to kind of fall back and rely on. And so we had to find a way to, fund the things that we're supposed to fund, do a couple of things we'd like to fund, but to do it, having to live within our means to a degree that I don't think we've, necessarily done as much, when we've had this extra federal money as a cushion. So, we've got a budget that increases public school funding for every single public school district in Ohio. I think that's a good place to be. At the same time, we're getting some really important property tax relief, significant relief, swift. We have a new process where we're going to say that schools should have a carryover balance, like most local governments do, but it shouldn't be exorbitant. And what you have now in this state is we've grown to about $10.5 billion sitting in the operating accounts of school districts across Ohio. That's up from $3 billion, not that long ago. So, reforming Medicaid, making sure that, we're providing what folks are entitled to, but having some cost control so that's not kind of a runaway program, I think was really important. We wanted to do good conservative policy. I think we wanted to respect our members and their objectives. And so when you look at this budget, I think you're going to see from top to bottom, a lot of really innovative conservative ideas and programs and policies that members wanted to see. And then finding ways to, really energize our state, not just to have the normal economic development programs, but we're committing to a very significant project in Northeast Ohio that I think is going to put Ohio on the national map and really be one of those things that, when kids talk about, do I want to be in Ohio? Do I want to stay in Ohio? Is there things that I can do, and grow my family here? The kind of things that we look around other places and say, why don't we have that? As a result of this budget, we're going to have that in Ohio.
And you have brought up such a great point, historically speaking, about this Browns deal in particular. Kind of talk us through again the comparison to other states, right? I think that was a great way to break it down.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at other states all around the country, this is kind of the norm when you talk about these large scale kind of public-private projects. Keep in mind, this is the largest, one of, if not the largest economic development project that we've had in Ohio history. We have $1.2 billion at least in private investment going into this project. And so for the state to essentially put, I view it as a loan, a $600 million loan with a repayment structure, with a bond security to make sure that the taxpayers are made whole. We think that's just a good deal. And, you look at a state like Tennessee, that's a red state that a lot of our members are excited, say we want to emulate in some ways. Well, they're talking about a project that's almost double what we're talking about here in terms of public financing. Las Vegas, Texas, Indiana has been eating our lunch in Ohio on entertainment events for more than a decade because they had the most heavily publicly funded stadium deal in the country for more than a decade. And so what we have now is a relatively, more modest proposal compared to some of those deals where I still think you're going to get probably the premier entertainment destination all of America, and it's going to be here in Northeast Ohio.
Absolutely. I want to talk briefly about libraries since that has been a big topic of conversation. If either of you want to tackle what we're doing for libraries.
Sure. So, we have a public library districts throughout the state of Ohio. I think most people recognize that. It's one of those, the local districts, one of those things that's sort of like a lot of local government. It grew. We have, for example, in Cuyahoga County, there's actually 54 cities. Now, you may not have planned it out that way if you were starting in 1803, but it's really sort of a history of local government in Ohio and having local control. One of the things that does is in Ohio, we have the most number of local taxing districts of any state in the union, over 6,000 local taxing districts, and more than California, which of course that's a city or a state that's 4 times our size. And so what that means is there are each of those local districts want to have control in their own tax. In the case of public library districts, which we have 255 in the state, they all have their own executive director. They all have their own staff. They all control their own operation. And some of that makes really good fiscal sense. In Hamilton County, there's 1 public library district. In Ashtabula County, there are 9. And the question is, do they really need 9 separate districts? We're not doing anything about that right now. But what we are doing with a public library fund is this. Years ago, we began funding public library districts as a percentage of the total revenue of the state, 1.7%. And that has changed a little bit, that number. But the what has happened often is as revenues have in many cases outpaced inflation, and especially in the Biden years when $6 trillion was released into the economy, income taxes revenue came in, sales tax came in. We had this huge increase in any of the local entities that were funded on a percentage basis. So essentially what we did is say, we're going to take off the percentage basis. We're going to look at the public library fund like we look at just about everybody else and examine it and spend the money that we think we have. So the public library fund will be increased from what it was in the last General Assembly. And then every 2 years, we'll look and see, well, how much money do we have to spend? Because on this, like we do for schools, like we do for a whole variety of, Medicaid and all of the other things that we fund. So we think it's just a fairer way to make sure that it's the same way as everybody else.
Absolutely. Thank you for breaking that down. It's tricky at first. You look at it, it looks like a decrease. It's not, right?
Well, it's actually an increase.
Right.
The public library fund, in terms of dollars, will be increased, and then those dollars will be distributed to the 250 or so public library districts in the same manner they were before.
And part of the reason why this is an issue is you're kind of hiding the true cost of what we're spending when you just do it as a percentage. We're trying in this budget, I think you see throughout the budget, where we're getting away from what I would kind of call autopilot appropriations, right? Where it's just we've earmarked a percentage and you've kind of hide the cost that way. So you can still provide funding, but every 2 years, we have the power of the purse, and the legislature should be determining the amount that goes to any individual program rather than just saying you always get X.
So I had, and as we go through this, remember legislators here, they're part-time folks. We're dealing with a bureaucracy that's full-time, but we also have a responsibility not just to make decisions in the billions of dollars, but to look at each of these issues. So we looked at the public library fund and said, how should this go? But we've also, and when I say we, mostly Brian Stewart and his committee, have gone through and looked at specific things and said, do we need to fund this? So one of the things that will not be funded anymore is the Ohio Elections Commission. The Ohio Elections Commission was created in the 70s based on a law that was passed, which has now been ruled unconstitutional. And in effect, the Elections Commission, although it has hearings, the real purpose of it has kind of gone by the wayside. And we spent, I'm not sure how much we were spending. Brian, do you know?
$500,000 to $1 million a year.
Yeah. And maybe in the course of things, $500,000 to $1 million with a $60 billion budget isn't that much, but there are a lot of those kinds of savings that are in the budget. And those things we'll be able to address those things either at the Board of Elections level or the Secretary of State level. So, there are 6,000 or 7,000 line items that the Finance Committee has gone through in about 10 weeks. And tried to get savings, but of course made sure that the things were funded that the public wants.
And I think we have to point out, we started this budget with, an executive proposal that about $2.4 billion of spending that was done through one-time money. You're not supposed to spend one-time money on ongoing programs. So we kind of viewed it as we needed to do, Doge is kind of all the rage nationally, right? And so it's our opportunity here locally to take that fine look at every item and really say, is this a program that needs to continue? Is this a program that needs to grow? I think you can see all through this budget where we've gone through and, if there was a new program proposed, we probably said no. If there was a huge increase, we dialed it back. There's a couple of instances where we've, abolished funding entirely. We took that $2.4 billion in one-time spending and reduced that down to about $890 million. So that's a huge bit of, belt tightening that, this budget situation kind of, we needed Republicans to act like Republicans and conservatives to kind of put their money where their mouth is and, do the hard work of kind of reining in some of this spending. And I'm glad we did.
And I won't put you on the spot, but you have a really good President Donald Trump impression when it comes to Dodge. I've heard it. I won't force you to do it here if you don't want to.
Can I ask you something, though? When you said, thanks for bringing that down, I've never heard that phrase before.
Thanks for bringing that down.
When I explained it to the Public Library Fund, you said, thanks for bringing that down.
Yeah. Did I?
Turn a phrase.
Man. I don't remember it, but it'll come back
it's
on
probably
campus.
Okay. I didn't know exactly. I guess meant explaining that. I think, but
Oh, I'm so sorry. breaking.
breaking it down.
Breaking, yes.
Bringing it down.
Yes. No, that's not a hip phrase
Okay.
that you miss, I promise.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's,
there are many
that's
hip phrases I'm
It's
missing
not
out on. but-
circulating. In Georgia, I was told I have an accent and still hear people give me that a little bit. I just think I'm not speaking clear enough.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But thank you for the clarification, Mr. Speaker. I do want to point out a couple of really good things that you guys have done, we've done in this budget, right? Focusing on mothers, babies, and families, our veterans, expanding access to childcare. Why were these important for you to also include in this budget?
Well, I think we wanted to have a pro-family budget. It's consistent with, we're both pro-life representatives. I mean, our caucus is still, a pro-life caucus. And so we wanted to find ways to, let members fight for those issues within the bounds of the law that we have today. And so there's a lot of instances where we've got a $750 tax credit now for donations made to, crisis pregnancy centers. We have, increased funding for a pilot program on childcare to say that we're going to have employers, employees, and the government kind of, hand in glove, finding ways to expand childcare. We're maintaining a pretty robust, I still think a pretty robust publicly funded childcare system that was expanded in the last budget. That's a tough thing to keep paying for when revenues go down, but we maintain that program where it was. We're going to require that the abortion report that is required to be done in October of each year, we're going to move that up to March so we have better data. There's a lot of ways we can continue to kind of change hearts and minds if we have the data on where abortion is occurring and the frequency of it. And so we want to be a state that helps mothers and helps kids, and I think we've done that here.
Yeah, I think too, we have to understand that not everything is going to be done through a state agency or through some immediate state funding to a state agency. And so, the increase, for example, to pregnancy resource centers, which are folks on the ground who are helping children. And generally, we sort of had a mantra that if this helps pregnant women and babies, we want to do it.
Right.
We always want to make sure that the money the government is spending, that it's effective. We can say, we spent $5 million helping this problem. Or did it help the problem? Or did we just spend $5 million? But, those local pregnancy resource centers are doing great work. And, it's a little bit of a cliche to say children are the future, but we have a huge problem in Ohio and the United States with the birth rate. And if we can help pregnant mothers have a successful pregnancy and help those kids when they're just starting out, it really is the Lord's work.
How many grandkids at this point?
11 grandkids, believe it or not, 7 and under. So they're a lot of fun.
It depends on who's introducing you, the number of grandchildren, seemingly.
Well,
Sometimes it's 10, sometimes
well,
it's
yeah,
12.
you get that with whoever's introducing. They've looked at whatever website there is, and
Did you leave the
I've
grandkid off
been
the
married
website?
40 years. I have 4 children, 11 grandchildren. So the last time they said he's been married nearly 30 years. Cheryl, my wife, was sitting, and I'm like, it's 40. It's 40. So yeah, it depends on what version of the internet you looked at.
Time flies when you're having fun. That's what
Somebody's
that's
messing
what
with
they
his
say.
Wikipedia page, I think.
Yeah,
you know.
right.
Yeah, probably.
It's not me.
Probably.
And Rep Stewart, you have a nice little family of your
do.
own too. So
Yeah.
that's
We're still in the
important.
raising our own stage of life, but yeah,
Yeah.
16, 13, and 9. So
Oh, okay.
Teenagers, I remember that.
Driving age.
Yeah.
Wow.
close to
Look
a
at that.
license. So Yeah.
Oh, look at
Mm.
that. Amazing. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about the different priorities. I appreciate delving into that. I want to kind of talk next. What sets this budget apart from past budgets that you can remember?
Well, I guess this is easy to say. Every budget is unique. When the Republicans were in a minority in the House in 2009 and 2010, and Governor Strickland, there were huge cuts everywhere. So it was very unpopular, and that would just, it's more difficult to do when you don't have money. Governor Kasich walked in and really did have to do a lot of cutting. We did not have a capital budget in 2012, maybe not in 2014, and essentially said we're not we did some capital spending, but the part where legislators get to spend community projects money, we didn't do. So things, of course, improved, especially after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. And during that time period, it was a little bit more of a normal process. You had to make trade-offs, back and forth. The things that then things changed fairly dramatically in the 21 and 23 years because of what the federal government was doing. They were doing two things. One is the $6 trillion into the economy meant that people were making more money, and sales tax were up. So there was a lot of cash, for one thing. But in addition, the federal government was sending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into the state of Ohio. When I was the president of the Senate, now the Speaker of the House, you go to these national conferences, and I met with Senate presidents during the pandemic, and we all had the same, if we want to call it problem, is more money than we know what to do with. And the problem was making sure we didn't create ongoing projects. So there were a lot of interesting ideas, temporary reductions in certain things, purchases of one-time. And we did that, as you know, in the 24 budget, the famous OTSCIF capital project, where we were actually giving money even to private entities that were not bonded, and they were going out and spending. This budget, in fact, first meeting with Governor DeWine in January, sat down with President McCauley, and he said, well, looks like Santa Claus went home. Governor DeWine said that. And the answer, of course, is we don't have all of the federal money that was sitting there for education or whatever it is. We're not going to have a capital budget like we did before. And it is, in that sense, a much more normal budget process. People are used to spending a lot of money over the last 4 or 5 years. But that has changed, and that's why it's a tougher situation for a finance committee chair in the House and everybody else to wrap their head around.
I would just add, I think the process this is my third budget being in the House, and just the process I think was really well done. I think the Speaker very early on instituted a program where we got rid of little small finance subcommittees in favor of sending the parts of the budget that relate to our standing committees to those standing committees. And so, for example, every part of the budget that dealt with agriculture was at the Agriculture Committee. That was a great thing because those members who are, largely in the ag world, they know to ask better questions than I do. Folks in the Medicaid space ask better questions than I could on finance. And so you actually had 95 of 99 members of the House sat on a committee that heard substantive parts of the budget testimony throughout the budget process. And so we saw that in our amendments, which we got over 3,000 amendments, because I think members felt more ownership over the process, more of an ability to really dig down and have amendments that were really specific. And so we had just a really great range of creativity. And I think you're seeing it, when members feel more involved in the process, when they know that, to my understanding, every Republican has, at least one or multiple amendments in this budget. When members know that they help shape the final product, I think it helps us get support for the final product. And I think people walk away from it, really feeling like they had more of an opportunity to represent their district, fight for their priorities. And I think that's the Speaker deserves a lot of credit for, putting that new process in place.
And I will say, I did hear a Democratic member of the House applaud you for being transparent during the entire process. So that's always good to hear.
No, in fact, I had some nice messages from some Democrat members regarding the Senate Bill 1 process. Even though all the Democrats voted against it, they were glad that they got. And that's the one of the geniuses of the First Amendment isn't just that people get to talk; it's that when they get to talk, all of those. When you don't let people talk, they feel like somehow they get a bad deal. Let everybody get their say, and I think we'll be. It's just a much better process.
It's a great way to put it, as if I'm in the position to say that, right? I got the 5-minute warning. So
Really?
my last question.
I thought this was your show.
No, this is your
That's my show?
our show.
Oh, did I give you a 5-minute warning?
No, the beautiful
producer
folks
did?
in the back gave me the 5-minute warning. So quickly, what happens next for this legislation? having it has passed the House chamber?
Well, of course, the next step is that it will go on to the Senate, and they will have really about 2 months, and I think the folks over there will be less crabby because they'll get the budget more quickly. And then we'll have a conference committee to reconcile the changes in mid-June. I think we'll get it passed by June 28th or so. And then, of course, Governor DeWine will have almost the final say with his veto pen, and that's his right as a governor. And, we may come back and decide, do we want to override any of those vetoes? But, for right now, what the House has been able to do, I'm very proud of Brian and the whole team, the policy team, the members. So we'll see what happens in the next episode.
Yeah, you all have been absolutely incredible. It's been so amazing to watch all the staffs at work. And, we're here to get the message out, of course, and highlight what we can. But a testament to your teams and you all as lawmakers. And I am told now that that's it. So I'm going to talk about our social media page where people can find more about us. You can subscribe. Our social media is the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook and the Ohio House _GOP on Instagram. We have a really successful Instagram. We do a lot of reels. I would encourage everybody to go look.
Though. My ex account.
You do have a good Twitter. You went viral.
Brian Stewart OH.
We
What's
haven't gone
reels?
viral.
What does that mean?
Reels, a quick accumulation of videos.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like a quick,
Interesting.
this is what we did at session. Yeah.
Is that on MySpace?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, what's MySpace?
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
That
I know
was
what
for the Collins team, I think.
I know what
like that, hear
MySpace.
that. Yeah.
Also, you can subscribe on YouTube. We'll be there or wherever you watch your podcast. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Let it go, champ.
All right.
Yeah.
All right,
Go.
good. Thank you.